Connected Series Podcasts, The Great Awakening Subscribers Monthly Q&A. Welcome, Truth Seekers, to another episode of the Great Awakening Reports Connected Series Podcast. I'm Mark, publisher and editor of the Great Awakening Report, and your guide to this unfolding journey through the global shift of consciousness we call the Great Awakening. This podcast is your touchstone in a time of rapid transformation, spiritual realignment, and global revelation. In each episode, we go beyond the headlines, connecting dots across our platform from our in-depth monthly reports, Truth Seeker weekly briefings, and Awakening Sleeping Giant reports and special reports. Our mission to uncover the hidden patterns, energies, and disclosures shape this new era and empowered you with grounded insights that support your awakening, alignment, and expansion. Whether you're a long-term subscriber or just tuning in for the first time, this space is a sanctuary for those seeking truth, connection, and conscious evolution. I'm honored, as always, to be joined by my co-host, Craig Cook. Craig is a long-time truth seeker, spiritual explorer, and someone whose grounded wisdom and intuitive clarity bring power, depth to every conversation we share. Craig, welcome back. It's always a pleasure to navigate these times with you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Pleasure's mine. Glad to be back and looking forward to celebrating some freedom this weekend.
Great. In today's episode, we're diving into the 10 most asked questions from our subscribers for the month of June. These are the questions that emerge from our community's collective curiosity, concerns, and observations as we continue to move through this time of rapid change and revelation. Each question reflects key themes from recent events and aligns with the ongoing research and insights featured in our Great Awakening monthly reports, Truth Seeker weekly briefings, Sleeping Giant weekly reports, and really what we call the special investigative reports, which are identified as special reports. As we explore each question, we'll connect the dots, revealing how these inquiries tie into the larger story unfolding across the globe. From geopolitical shifts and hidden agendas to spiritual upgrades and conscious expansion, this Q&A session is designed to bring you multidimensional clarity and grounded awareness. These conversations aren't just about understanding what's happening. They're about empowering you to engage more consciously in your awakening journey. When we seek truth, we build the foundation for greater alignment, sovereignty, and unity consciousness. So let's get started with your 10 most powerful questions for the month of June 2025, revealing answers and our shared intention to awaken, align, and rise. Our first topic heading is global conflict and geopolitics. Question number 1. What's really behind the escalating Iran-Israeli conflict? And is the U.S. complicit in triggering a wider war?
Well, the answer that we have based on research that has been conducted is that this conflict appears to be premeditated and a premeditated escalation. So there's Israel strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, and that was reportedly using U.S. supplied weapons. And then there's the provoked retaliation that created the appearance of this like tit for tat war. And then there's been insider leaks suggesting that this was a managed conflict, and that's in order to justify further militarization and emergency powers. This is all while potentially derailing Trump's peace-driven campaign, as he's been talking about for many, many months about having peace in different parts of the world, right? Not just this one. So this fits the whole false flag template and engineered conflict, which is used to manipulate public sentiment and geopolitical leverage.
You know, Craig, I want to take you back a little bit on the history of false flags. I think everybody would kind of enjoy that. You know, back in the 16th through the 18th century, the pirates used a naval deception of flying under a false flag or under the enemy's flag, and that would allow them to move their ships in close proximity so they could attack and obviously take over their ships. So this is the origination of false flags. Now, obviously, in the current situation and current research, and let me drill down a little bit on some of the things you were saying, But the reports we're receiving, these false flags, the destruction of the deep state, Iranian nuclear weapons manufacturing. So what happened is that I think they, under the cover, Trump actually destroyed the deep state's manufacturing facilities, while what Israel was trying to do is have us attack just the main nuclear facilities, and so nuclear power facilities. So this is all being set up as a false flag, and also the stories now coming out that they're setting up false flags because of the retaliation of Iran on U.S. soil. So that's being talked about quite a bit in the influencer community. Now, the other thing that's hitting Israel pretty hard is the discovery of the October 7th Hamas the false flag attack there on the Israeli music festival was actually some of the military, the negative military, I should say, attacking their own people. So all this is coming out in the press and being revealed. So I think this is, and also being represented in some of the Q material that has identified what Israel is doing and what Israel is being exposed for doing is really they're the main instigators of false flags around the world.
Yeah, it's interesting too that you bring up the history of the pirate ships and hence the name false flag. And it's a thing, right? There's a reason why it's called false flag because it was a tactic that has been used for a long time. And even with this part of the world, I remember sometime was it in the 60s? I'm sure you know 60s or 70s. Wasn't there a false flag
Yes.
with an Israeli and U.S. Warship? I think, and
Yes.
right.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, so this is an ongoing tactic, something for people to be aware of, and just when they hear mainstream news and look at alternative reports to just use their own critical thinking and discernment and try to determine what's what.
Well, just to give you a little bit more information, even a lot of the you know the false flags in history, they actually you know go back almost they happen on every kind of a 10-year definitely on a global scale, 10 to 15 years. And what they're really doing is this is how they support their military operations. The U.S. What they call the industrial military industrial complex, their revenue on an annual basis is just pushing close to $1 trillion, and that's to build weapons and
Right.
ships and everything. So this is what Trump is trying to bring down: is that whole industry, that whole mechanism of keeping us in a wartime environment, cycling one conflict after another just to support that machine. So anyway, good topic. I think we covered it pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. Let's move on. The next category is domestic chaos and controlled collapses. And the question is, are the recent U.S. inner city riots part of a planned destabilization?
The answer is absolutely. And the civil unrest in cities like LA, Chicago, and New York, branded mysteriously with foreign flags and well-funded organizations. Like, just to give you, we have a lot of pictures in some of the reports that we put together of actually the Mexican flag being flown in LA in all of their riots and some of the other stuff. So that really is like, hey, Mexico's going to take over California. That's really an interesting kind of representation of what some of the people thought those riots were about. This bears, all the hallmarks of a colored revolution, and it appears coordinated to create a pretext for federal emergency declarations, suspension of civil liberties, and also the deployment of military assets within the U.S. And this chaos serves, the World Economic Forum and their agenda, which is the deep state agenda of a central control system, and also population demoralization campaign, which is, with inflation and some of the other things that are going on right now, this is really wear and tearing on the global population.
Yeah, that really feeds into people's psyche too, with the demoralization, and that's a page straight out of the communist playbook, right?
Right,
To
right.
break down society. So, and it's very interesting to see how organized it is across the nation. Where there's not only L.A. but New York City, other areas, and how supplies are brought in, materials, signs, all kinds of things, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
We're also seeing reports of, several agendas like 14 to 17 blue cities versus red states, or blue states versus red states agenda, where the governors and the attorney generals and other elected officials in the state are controlled opposition or blackmailed assets for the deep state, Democratic controlled left wing extremists. So, setting up their secession from the United States, forming their own government backed by the CCP, with LA being their capital. Now, I know this sounds like really extreme conversation information, but they're really trying to set Trump up so that he looks like he's going to implement mass arrest, or he's implementing, riots and all the other kind of stuff, and they're responding so that their state governors can now step forward and say, "Hey, we're not going along with King Trump. We're not going to go along with his agenda, and we're going to separate." So that's also in the wind, and we're picking up a lot of information on that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think you hit the nail on the head with creating chaos, because then out of that chaos is what comes. It's that problem, reaction, solution,
Right, right.
Hegelian dialectic, and
That's right.
yep, and it's that chaos that ensues the reactions out of people to do these extreme things. So yeah, it's very interesting to observe.
Question 3. Why is the financial sector hiding record commercial defaults and bank liquidity issues?
Yeah, right. It's a good question. The system is cracking behind the scenes. Regional banks, they're falling quietly. Commercial real estate loans, they're defaulting, and retail chains, they're vanishing. I know for the past, what, Mark, maybe 3 years, I would
Right,
keep texting you, "Oh, look
right,
at this building, look at this building that's going for
right,
fire sale, 80% off,
right,
90%
right.
off, right?"
Yeah,
And that has an impact. Someone's gonna eat it, and these regional banks have to eat it quite often. And then with brands, you go to certain malls, they look completely different than they did, say, 10 years ago. With
right.
you don't even recognize the names of the stores that are in there anymore, because
Yeah,
all these legacy brands are dying.
yeah.
It's very, very interesting. But that, there's really aren't those reports out there, because it's just masking the truth, and probably to prevent panic and so forth. But it's definitely like this controlled demolition that's paving the way for eventually central bank digital currency rollouts as a solution. And then with that would be the new social credit scoring system, part of the financial system, engineered scarcity, all under the banner of, we're going to bring financial stability. And that's, a big risk. But the good thing is, with the past 6 months here, with what's been going on with a lot of the regulation, especially around crypto assets, there's a lot of things coming into play with like stable coin regulation that's going to prevent this rollout of the CBDCs. There's positive alternatives that are coming to light here, and at least things are starting to trend in the right direction as opposed to the way they were, say, 5 years ago.
Now we're going to answer this a little bit more in the next question, and that basically we're tracking kind of two timelines with what's going on with the financial system. But I wanted to bring up something that we prepared and we created, but we have two special reports. It's part one, part two of the great global everything collapse. And what we did is we researched over 20 plus different markets, industries, and institutions in the process of collapsing. Now, this is really outside the norm, because in the past, when we've had recessions, my business background is with recessions and buying distressed assets and converting them. But what we found with these 20 different markets was that this is an event that's never, it's historic. It's never happened before. And so we're seeing a total over economic collapse. And this has to happen to rebuild, because the reason why is it's so corrupt. There's so much fraud, and there's so much tied to trafficking and tied to drugs and everything else, money being, U.S. aid and what the government is giving away to all different kinds of sources. So all of this system that they've created, it has to collapse. We can't fix it. We can't go in and make changes and make adjustments. It's got to collapse first. and then we transition, and then we rebuild, which we'll talk about. But I think,
Right. That's a good segue into the next question, actually.
yeah,
Right. And that's is America on the brink of a major economic reset? And if so, what does that really mean?
the answer is yes. The U.S. is in what I call a two-phase silent collapse, where we start with stagflation, which is what we're in now. Stagflation is when certain things are going up and certain things are going down. To give an example, real estate's going down, and you've got inflation in all of your products in your stores, in your grocery stores. So you've got prices going up there, and you've got some prices going down. That's what stagflation is. Then you've got mass debt default, where now the default's on homes that have been hidden and sequestered. All of that's coming out. And once that information hits, then the market goes boom. Institutional breakdowns moving us into a series of deflationary events, which is phase two, which is now everything deflates. And so, but this isn't organic, it's orchestrated. And the goal to bankrupt the old economy, which is it has to happen. It's the a system in place is gone. I mean, there's nothing holding it up. And then they're looking to erase sovereignty wealth and usher in, a World Economic Forum, what we call the aligned green reset. Now, the good news, and I want to be very strong on this, the good news is there's sovereign states, which is the BRICS nations, and the awakening entrepreneurs are creating new strategies and building new alternatives for the future. So it's exciting, but we've got to go through this kind of collapsed transition period for us to get to the other side so we can rebuild.
Yeah, and speaking about these new solutions and awakened entrepreneurs, I just recently saw a clip on MicroStrategy and the overall strategy that Michael Saylor is following with Bitcoin
Right,
and having a Bitcoin uh, reserve as part of your corporate balance sheet, right? Having
right.
a Bitcoin strategy. And the fascinating thing is the way he is setting it up, where he's setting up additional preferred stock offerings to raise more money to buy more Bitcoin, is that it's actually sucking money out of the bond market,
Wow.
which the bond market has been so on a bull run for the past whatever 40, 50 years. And now with because of regulation, so many institutions are mandated to buy bonds, such as insurance companies and so forth. But these bonds pay very little returns, and there's high risk. And now what Michael Saylor's done by having a Bitcoin treasury, on the balance sheet, is taking money out of the bond market and creating this capital infusion to buy more Bitcoin, and the spread is enormous, where he's able to offer really good returns that say 8%, 10%, 12% for these different preferred stock offerings. So that yield from 8 to 12%. And he still has a margin that's going, another 40% cushion. So he's making a ton of money, but yet offering a solution to this problem of just a scarcity and yield. So this is a whole new reset in how financial markets and companies and even individuals can uh, play with their own financial balance sheet.
That's just another example of the positive energy and what's happening to the planet, and that there's new solutions for, and also a reason why these old systems have to collapse. They cannot sustain, based on their corruption, fraud, blackmail, or, the runaway dollar debt, in the government. So all these systems have to collapse, and these new systems are exciting. And yeah, Craig, yeah, you nailed it with the Bitcoin. It's the future.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, next section is health, science, and disclosure. Question number 5. What is the real story behind turbo cancers, and why isn't the mainstream media covering it?
Yeah, so turbo cancers, that's a fairly new term that's come about over the past few years. They're seen as highly aggressive, fast moving cancers that it's been reported to be linked to mRNA vaccine platforms. So there's studies out there which suppressed in the mainstream, but in through alternative news sources you see them, and they suggest that these shots deregulate the immune system, and create that spike protein expression, and big pharma, global regulators, and media are complicit in burying the data. There's big money there, obviously, in pharma, and there's the liability that, as of now, they're not even liable. That may change with things that RFK Jr. is working on, um, but the suppression continues, and these perpetrators are currently shielded. And as long as the public is really unaware, um, there's not going to be the pressure to break the dam. But it's interesting because you keep hearing and seeing reports of younger people catching cancer, how fast it's coming on, and it's a thing. It's happening, and it's a matter of time till more light is shed on the topic.
Craig, this has kind of hit me personally with some extended family members. I had one family member get hit with a stomach tumor. The guy was 42, 43 years of age, and he actually went
Mm.
through surgery, and it was, maybe the size of a tennis ball, and it was very aggressive. He didn't have any issues, and all of a sudden he was just hit with this, and then he went in for surgery, and had part of his stomach taken out, all that kind of terrible stuff, and then he comes out, and then later on the surgery didn't work, and they have to go in and do another surgery, and they put a plate in his stomach,
Oh my God.
a plate. And so it's just unbelievable. This young guy, he's really works hard, and got a very successful business. And wow, he gets just totally knocked off his feet. And then I have one other family member. He's a little bit older, in good health, rides a bike every day or whatever. I just got word in the last 2 weeks that he has two, not one, but two brain tumors.
Oh my God.
And they went in to biopsy those, and the prognosis, they haven't, actually biopsied them yet, but the prognosis from the doctors weren't good, basically on what they saw. And so, anyway, so this is really going to hit us. Everything I'm hearing, this is going to grow. It's not going to shrink. And also, those two members of the family, they had taken up to 3 and possibly 4 injections
Mm.
each. So we're all tracking this. It's all coming out. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yes, over the course of the next 5 years, it's going to be really telling.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah. Well, the next topic is spiritual awakening and frequency war. And the question from the audience is, why do spiritual practices feel more urgent now than ever?
Oh, this is a great question. The answer is there's an energetic frequency of Earth that's rising. And that's all my research says they're consciousness waves. We're in this Oort cloud, this maybe 1,000 times the size of our solar system. We've been in it since the 1950s. Well, the more you move toward the center of that cloud, the higher the frequency, which is the higher the consciousness. And we're actually now at the center. And so we're actually going through the center. So there's a lot of mayhem. This is what's creating all the problems with everything that's hidden now has to come to light. It cannot be hidden anymore.
Hmm.
So this is why the spiritual practices are really important. The solar activity, the cosmic alignments. There's an August 25 portal opening. We've got a collective trauma purge that are intensifying for all of us personally. And this is part of the awakening process. Then there's the practices like meditation, breath work, and detoxification are essential to stabilize our nervous system and tune into these higher frequencies. So the choice now is simple: either align or you're going to fragment.
Yeah, that's everything is been going through a consciousness shift, and I'd say over the past 5 years, especially, it's really been accelerating. And really, probably since 2012 is when it really started to accelerate. But it seems that each year it keeps accelerating more and more, and that's why these practices that you mentioned, it's really essential because the nervous system is really taxed, and you want to get that balanced. And everything that society throws at us from the news media, all the stuff that we've been talking about, is a lot of fear that disrupts your mindset, and keeps you in a state of fear and panic and anxiety, that's really opposed to the shift that's happening.
I also wanted to mention too is that, your background and you have a lot of intel because of your personal work, but, your PhD in energy healing, you know, I would really love to hear a little bit more about what you're seeing and as in your practice or what you're sensing and seeing in that regard.
Yeah, well, I'd say the most common condition that people have when they come to see me is anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anxiety is just something that's really difficult to contend with. Uh,
Right.
yeah, and that could be rooted in a variety of areas. It could be based out of fear.
Right.
It could actually be something that's more of obsessive worrying that then just at times boils up to anxiety, and then that anxiety can even lead to panic attacks. I've seen that. And there's also just the nervousness, right? So there could be obsessiveness thinking and worrying and concern that boils up to nervousness, then that boils up to anxiety. And it really is the most common thing I see.
That's a good answer. Let's go on to question number 7. What's the connection between thoughts, emotions, and frequency shifts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's really tied to what we were just talking about too. So, thoughts and emotions, they carry a vibrational frequency. Together they shape your consciousness field. There's different energetic fields that surround our body. There's depending upon the system that you're studying. I'm focused more on the Chinese system, which has breaks it down to three, what are called three Wei Qi fields. And the first one sits about an inch off your body, and it's tied to the physical body. The second field is about a foot and a half, and that's where more of your thoughts and mental field and emotional field are. And then the third field is like the spiritual field. Uh, and these fields, they expand and contract based on your health, and that your health could be your emotional health, your mental health, your physical health, and then do you have a spiritual walk? Is that healthy? So when we're talking about our thoughts and emotions, if we're in a constant state of anxiety, it actually constricts your field, and your field, it acts like a force field where it's keeping actual pathogens out. It surrounds you, so it keeps pathogens out, and then also other people's negative thinking. It helps to keep that at bay as well, because there are these like energetic darts in a sense that come at you. So, but when you're in this state of fear, anxiety, all these different concerns and things that throw our nervous system out of balance, it it depletes us, it weakens us. So yeah, another thing is too fear or division. When our thoughts are rooted in fear or division, it also constricts our energetic fields. But when you're thinking more healthy in your mind and in your feelings, like such as generating love and gratitude, more of a unity consciousness, cooperation rather than competition, you resonate higher. You have a higher vibrational frequency, and these energetic fields actually expand. Uh, it's really just quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and it also plays into manifestation, the timelines that we're moving into, and overall spiritual sovereignty, our way that we live as a free, sovereign spiritual being.
That's a good lead. I think of fear as a multi-sided octagon, if you will, and you just addressed maybe 3 or 4 sides of it. Let me try to give a little more fill in, a little more drill down on maybe what maybe some of the other sides of the octagon are.
Mhm.
Fear actually shuts down the mind. It blocks, your grounded, rational, critical, logical thinking. And let me tell you something personally that kind of hit me, and it doesn't happen very often now, but I'm pretty stable. I'm pretty consistent with my frequency. But I had a kind of something hit me first part of the week, and but negative emotions, man, they really hit me harder than before, and it's almost like immediate karmic kind of boom, it really bounces back at me. And what it does, it goes through my body and my nervous system, and it feels like a negative frequency ripping through my body. And I've never felt that before. I've never felt the intensity of it. But the more intense I am with my reaction, remember I didn't respond well. Respond is I take a break and I breathe and I can manage it, but I didn't. And so it took a lot for me to release that energy and to return to a calmer, kind of higher vibrational frequency. But boy, did I learn a lesson. It's like, Mark, you can't do that. And I'm more vigilant. I'll definitely be more observant of some of those things. But it was really an interesting experience. I mean, it was physically very disruptive.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, as we've been doing the work for many, many years, both of us, we've become more perceptually aware. So when you get hit like that, you're noticing how it has an impact
Right.
on not only your mind, your emotions, but your physical body.
That's right.
And yep, yep. And when you're talking about fear, and how it freezes you, that's absolutely right. The energy of fear resides in the kidneys. It's
Right.
a negative aspect of the kidneys, and the kidneys are responsible for our vitality, our drive, our motivation to move forward. So when we're in fear mode, it does freeze us. It stops us in our tracks. It's very interesting. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So, with that, the next category is truth, media, and psychological warfare. And the question from the audience is why are more people rejecting legacy media and turning to sources like GAR?
The answer is traditional media has collapsed into propaganda. It's just a propaganda machine now. And people instinctively feel the lies, omissions, and narrative manipulations. Platforms like GAR offer curated truth, patterned recognition, and a higher context of synthesis, something corporate news can't offer. Trust is now rooted in integrity and discernment, not in brand logos.
100%. I mean, over the past 20 years, the internet has really brought this to light by you'll see clips of how all the news channels are saying the exact same thing,
Right,
following a
right,
script, right? There's that.
right.
There's also where you'll see clips over time. Like I remember, I think it was CNBC, how they have clips. They'll say one thing and then the other, and then the next, and the opposite, and they just go back and forth. And everything they're saying is in contrast to what's actually happening in the market. There's all these different examples that once you notice this online, you start to question, wow, yeah, what are they feeding us? And there's a reason there's a hashtag that's very popular these days. That hashtag Alex Jones was right. He's one of the pivotal alternative news media sources that gets ridiculed and demonized. But hey, not to say he's always right, but he's right, been right about a lot of stuff. And it's interesting how you see the mainstream news media uh, playing out their narratives, trying to control the propaganda. And that's exactly why it's collapsing and why people are moving to sources like GAR.
Some interesting research that we found, CNN is operating in the negative with fewer than maybe 200 to 400,000 views or viewers on a daily basis.
Wow.
I mean, and this is one of the lowest, and they can't pay their bills with that. Now, the other part of this is we all heard that Doge found in U.S. aid that they were funding,
Right.
media companies like CNN. So all of this stuff is getting exposed and brought to light. Now, another fun thing is that Joe Rogan, I don't know whether you know this, is now the number one viewed source for alternative news in America. Number
Wow.
two, number two is Tucker Carlson is
Hmm.
is definitely in a close second place. So those are now what everybody's shifting to. Those are the reliable sources, and they feel like that information that's coming from Joe and Tucker is reliable and consistent and not manipulated or not no propaganda. So this is kind of an exciting time that we're watching this transition.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're just having open conversations.
Right. Right. Just like what we're doing. It's
Right.
just kind of the free, and people can sense, truth. They can sense, hey, these guys are trying to basically work through all the propaganda and get to the truth.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, the next is solutions, preparation, and sovereignty. Question number 9. What can we do to prepare for the next stage of the Great Awakening?
Well, a big thing is focusing on sovereignty. That was mentioned a couple minutes ago, but sovereignty in every domain. And we're talking financial. How are you going to get your financial house in order? Precious metals, things that are happening in parallel economies, cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin, just a variety of different asset classes, right? Then there's health. You mentioned earlier breath work, detoxification, and so forth. Just knowledge in and of itself, having independent study. We were just talking about mainstream compared to alternative. Taking your own independent study and being sovereign with that. And then, of course, spiritual practice, the inner work, having a spiritual walk, and not necessarily being confined to a specific religious system. Like, yeah, that helps. Some people need that, but really utilizing your own discernment, having your own spiritual practice, your own spiritual walk, and doing the work to connect and experiencing that sovereignty as a free spiritual being, and also building real communities, learning about local food and energy systems, and sharing that knowledge with each other. And the next change or the next wave of change is going to reward the self-reliant and the heart-centered.
This is a kind of an appropriate time to bring up our consulting group that you and I lead up and put together.
Mm.
It's designed and prepared to lead the way through not only just the global everything collapse, but there's a transition after that. And then what we call the rebuilding of America. And these are the three phases that we try to educate and train and give people information on. And this is part of the work that you and I are both doing. But, how can we survive the transition? That's the key question. And that's what we're trying to prepare everybody for as we go through this collapse. It's how do we make it through that transition? And then we're all going to join together and in a rebuilding effort it's going to take it to rebuild America. It's not going to be restore or replace or fix. It's going to be rebuild. So I think that's the preparation that we have to understand that we're going to go through this process. And as long as you're in a positive state, the transition is going to be easy for people. And the other thing we say too is like it's the negatives is watching a movie. If you're in, and that's if you're outside. If you're outside yourself, you're going to watch the movie and you're going to see the negative effects. If you're inside, it's inside yourself. That's where you just see, oh, this is just a movie. I'll wait and it'll pass and we'll move on to something else. So, sure, could you have minimal supplies? Could you have things in shortage? But I think that if we all pull together, I think this is a time of unification and that we will really come out stronger and better out the other end.
Yeah, I agree. It's a story of overcoming.
Right.
Whenever we're faced with challenges, what do we need to do? We need to overcome those challenges, which is why the work that you mentioned that we're putting together and doing is so important to help people overcome, have the right mindset to overcome.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, getting into the last topic here, the big picture, there's our final question number 10 from the audience. Are we witnessing the fall of an old world order or the birth of a new one?
Both. Like I've said, we've talked about this all through this conversation, but this Q&A session. But the collapsing system, it was never sustainable. It was. If you go back in history, if you look at the world wars and everything else, they were basically set to reset the financial systems. Financial systems only last about 50 years, 45 to 50 years. Currencies only last maybe 50 to 60 years before they all have to be reset. So it was, and also the system is built on exploitation, deception, and disconnection. So, hey, if you've got consciousness, moving up and exposing all the lies and all the corruption, then we have nowhere to go but for this whole thing to collapse. So, what we're seeing is it's a death spiral. And at the same time, a parallel society is rising consciousness, decentralization, heart centeredness. and spiritual awareness. Your alignment determines which system you will follow and manifest.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about currencies. If I remember correctly, I think the longest standing currency was a British system, the tally stick, I believe, if I remember correctly. And I think it lasted maybe 900 years, and it was
Yeah,
like a one for one. There
right,
wasn't,
right, right,
yeah, it wasn't based on fractional reserve banking, which is part of the big problem that we have today.
right.
And yeah, it's a thing, just like false flags are a thing. Currencies, they rise and they fall. It's a process, and it continues. And here we are, getting ready to witness, this old order uh, collapsing and fading away, and the birth of a new one.
I want to add here because we've done a lot of work in the Great Awakening report, and definitely this will manifest with the consulting group. But the plan to rebuild America kind of entails what we figured out is we're going to have new community centers. We call them the Garden Tower Centers. And the main hub of that center is the Garden Tower Farms, which is the indoor farming, which is really the driving force. You got to have healthy food going forward. We don't have good soils, we don't have clean air. So it's real critical that our food supply is replaced. That's number one. Number two is what we call the Healing Health and Wellness Centers. Craig's going to be a large part of that, an integral part of what the design and what we're developing in that area. And then also, last is the business development and innovation centers. So, what we're designing and what we've come up with is self sustaining, self perpetuating communities. And that's the future. And free energy drives that. 0 point energy is what everybody's talking about now. So, once these new technologies come forward and all this information gets kind of aligned and put into place, then communities will be self sufficient. And that's what our future is. And that's where you thrive. And that's where you also get back to these community centers are driving us to reunite with our neighbors, reunite with our community. And that's the future. And also to volunteer, to be a volunteer in this process to really help the community and to move into kind of what we call the fifth dimensional experience.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, part two to this question is what role does each truth seeker play in shaping the future?
Well, each truth seeker plays a very important role because each of us as individuals were considered, say, fractals of the whole. Um, there's a saying that we are our own little mini universe inside the greater universe. We're also
Right, right.
yep, and we're also a reflection of nature.
Yes.
Even our body systems even emulate nature, just the way the certain like organs look, how energy moves, and how it behaves emulates nature. So yeah, we're this fractal of the whole. So when we heal ourselves, the planet's healing. When we're in disarray and chaotic, we're contributing to a more chaotic world. But by us focusing on everything starts with the individual. When we start with ourselves, we get right with ourselves, we heal. We're then having better interactions with others, and it has an exponential ripple effect that eventually has an impact on the planet as a whole. Our alignment affects the field and the planet's
Right.
field. The planet has a field just like we do. So it's your courage to question, learn, and awaken and influence others, through that vibrational resonance, that higher frequency that you mentioned earlier, not being passive. Each one of us, we're a keynote in the collective awakening grid. So now's the time to step fully into that role. No time like the present.
Yeah, once anyone awakens, they are confronted with the reality that everything we've been taught is a lie. Now, that's a real stunning thing. I keep going deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole every day, meaning, oh my God, this lie, the lie is so
Right.
incredibly, so
Yeah.
incredibly large. It's unbelievable. Then comes what we call the choice. And the choice is to get educated and learn. That's become, a truth seeker. And what you're learning about is the real truth of an imaginable hidden reality that awaits us. And this is the most exciting and challenging journey for the soul that requires great courage, as you mentioned, to follow the path of awakening.
That's a great way to end the Q&A. That's fantastic, Mark. I couldn't agree more. Well, I think we should close it out. So I'd like to say thanks to everyone listening, watching, and walking this path with us. As we continue to navigate these profound times of global change and inner transformation, just please remember your awakening is part of something much greater, just everything we were just talking about. So each step you take in truth and awareness that sends those ripples into the collective field. Just really want to emphasize that. So stay grounded and lead with love, trust the wisdom rising within you. Your presence, matters more than ever now. So until next time, stay clear, stay heart centered, stay balanced, and stay deeply connected to your inner knowing.
Yes, and thank you for joining us on this journey through June's collected series, Subscribers Q&A, your trusted guide for decoding truth, embracing transformation, and expanding consciousness. We invite you to continue exploring with us through our in-depth monthly reports, weekly briefings, and companion media and immersive online courses, each designed to support your awakening process and empower your path forward. Until next time, stay awake, stay aligned, and above all, keep connecting the dots.